Secretary of Treasury.
Secretary of Treasury.
Deals with money.
Deals with money.
Secretary. So now we are going to look at our types or forms of government. Now, when we talk about what kind of government a country has, we don't often talk about the systems we've been describing. We usually talk about the type or form that a government has. After all, most people wouldn't describe the U.S. government as being a federal system of government, but as being a democracy. And even the word democracy isn't specific enough because America really is a republic. And when talking about Great Britain, we wouldn't refer to them as having a unitary or a parliamentary government, but we might describe it as a constitutional monarchy. However, the British might also describe their government as a democracy. So as we go through the different types, remember that countries can have a few of these forms going on at the same time. The type of government that a country has includes how the government operates, who holds power, and how they are organized. And let's go back to Great Britain to demonstrate our first type, which is a monarchy. You're probably familiar with monarchies. These are states that are ruled by a king or queen. Now, this used to be a very popular form of government. During the Middle Ages, most European countries had what are known as absolute monarchies, in which the king or queen held all of the power to pass laws, collect taxes, and fight wars. Think Louis XIV here of France or Henry VIII of Great Britain, who were kings with absolute power. But as the Enlightenment era swept across Europe, monarchs were often forced to share their power of making laws with legislative bodies, as we discussed with the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights. This led to what are known as constitutional monarchies. In a constitutional monarchy, there is still a king or queen, but their role is really ceremonial, such as we see here with Queen Elizabeth II, who really doesn't have any power. Maybe some influence, but no government power. Now, as most of the monarchies today are ceremonial, there are still a few absolute monarchies left, like Saudi Arabia, who just named a new monarch, King Salman, seen here with former U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel. For monarchies, power is hereditary, usually passed on from father to the eldest son. But again, there's not many absolute monarchies left. The end of the line for monarchies coincided with the rise of democracies, led by the founding of the United States. And democracy literally means rule by the people. Now, how do people rule in a democratic society? They vote. The first known democracy was that of ancient Athens around 2,500 years ago. Athens had what is known as a direct democracy. And a direct democracy means that all of its citizens make the decisions and laws for their society. Now, back in ancient Athens, that meant adult men who owned property and weren't slaves. Although no countries use a truly direct democracy form of government today, there are times where the people do get to vote on laws and policies, and we'll look at those in a minute. What America has is a representative democracy, or a republic, and to the republic for which it stands. Because we don't have the time or the ability to have the people all debate and vote on laws, we elect representatives to govern for us. What makes this a democracy is that we vote for those individuals to represent us. Now, as I mentioned, there are aspects of a direct democracy that exist inside of our representative democracy, and these are called referendums and initiatives. A referendum is when a state or town will ask the people to vote on whether a law should pass or not. Such an example, as we see here, in 2008, Arkansas voters were able to decide whether or not to allow a state lottery. 24 states in the U.S. also allow citizens to initiate laws themselves. Initiatives are when the people start or initiate an idea for a law. We covered how the state of Florida allows its electorate to initiate their own amendments. So as you see, although many countries, including the United States, have a representative democracy, or a republic. The spirit of direct democracy lives on. Now, during the late 1800s, as what was called the Industrial Revolution took hold, some people felt that the government wasn't doing enough to protect the poor working class people. And a new idea for a system of government began to rise called socialism. Socialism is pretty complex, as it can be both a form of government, an ideology, a cultural system, and different political parties. Now, it's hard to talk about socialism without looking at the economic system of capitalism, where buying and selling decides the direction of an economy. And also, the term socialism has come to mean many different things to different countries and governments. So we are going to try to keep it basic. Originally, the idea was that a society in general would share the means of production. Means of production is how you build or sell things. Socialism has developed into the idea that governments should help control parts of the economy where inequalities affect a large portion of the population. Kind of the idea that the wealth of a society should be shared with everyone. Today, when we talk about socialism, very often it means welfare programs that provide things like free healthcare and education. Canada's system of free healthcare would be an example of a socialist program. Some extreme examples of socialism would be China, in which the government owns many businesses and has a lot of control over the economy. But often socialism is associated with Scandinavian countries like Finland and Denmark and Sweden, which provide free education and healthcare to all of its citizens. Sometimes in America, politicians, especially Republicans, will throw out the word socialism to describe programs like Obamacare, where the government ensures that everyone has health insurance, or politician Bernie Sanders' idea of providing free college to all Americans. So as you can see, socialism means a lot of different things, but usually it's those free welfare programs. Now, communism is a system that takes socialism to an even more extreme level, but the two are definitely associated with each other. Communism, an idea popularized by a German philosopher named Karl Marx, was first tried out as a form of government by Russia after World War I in 1917, and they changed their name to the Soviet Union. The idea behind communism is that workers would rise up and take over the means of production, such as factories and farms, and share the wealth amongst themselves. And this can be seen in the communist symbol of the hammer and sickle, the tools used by factory workers and farmers. Communism later spread to China after World War II, but it never really developed the way Karl Marx envisioned. Rather than being a revolution of workers, these governments developed into dictatorships, personified by Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union and Mao Zedong of China, who in the process of forcing communism on the people, killed millions of their own citizens. As the government outlawed private property, seizing control of factories and farms, communism was forced on its people, not the other way around. In an upcoming video, we're going to go over the Cold War, in which tensions between communist Russia and democratic capitalist America, the two great, quote, superpowers, kept the world panicked that the two powers would destroy each other in a nuclear war. But all of this was a huge contributing factor to why communism never worked. Another reason it never worked is that without private property and people's desire to get rich, the people lacked incentive to work hard. Communism seemed to die with the collapse of the Soviet dictatorship and the countries they controlled, like Eastern Germany and Poland. Here we see the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Now, a few countries are still holding on to this idea of communism, such as China and Cuba, North Korea and Vietnam. But these countries are beginning to allow capitalist private enterprises, such as we've seen in China and Vietnam, who are allowing people to start their own companies. It's too soon to say what will happen with Cuba as they open their door to the United States and potential private industry. Now, in all of these forms of government, there's two terms for who holds power that you need to know. And one is called an oligarchy, in which power is held in the hands of a small group, usually the wealthy elite. Oligarchies include royal families, the rich business owners, or a political party. Sometimes people question whether the United States has some oligarchical tendencies in which the rich elite seem to have more power than the majority of Americans. But we certainly aren't an oligarchy in the true sense of the word. Some people also accuse China of being an oligarchy in which the Communist Party and their 87 million members control a country of 1.2 billion people. For your exam, you really just need to know that an oligarchy is the rule by the few. The other phrase you need to know is autocracy, and this means a rule by one. When you think of autocracy, think of dictatorships such as Cuba's Fidel Castro, Libya's now deceased Muammar Gaddafi, South Korea's Kim Jong-un, and Syria's Bashar al-Assad. And that is it for our systems and forms of government. Up next, we will examine the difference between domestic and foreign policy, but before we do, let's review. Which system of government shares power between a central and regional government? Remember, it's system and it's sharing. That's a federal system. Which system of government does the central government hold all of the power and delegate to the local levels? Remember, central is national. That's a unitary system. Which system of government do the local states hold all of the power with a weak central government? That's what the U.S. had first. It's a confederation or a confederate form of government. Which system of government chooses the executive from the legislative branch? Remember, this isn't about levels, it's about branches, it's parliamentary. Which form of government do the people hold power? So now we're talking forms, which is our types of government, not systems, and that would be a democracy. Which form of government is ruled by a king or queen? Well, it says it right at the top of our presentation. That's a monarchy. Which form of government does the government take over certain businesses to protect the people? Think free healthcare, free education. That's socialism. Which form of government is one person in charge? That's like a dictatorship. One person is an autocracy. Which form of government allows the people to vote on all the issues? This is where everyone in the community or the state makes decisions. That's a direct democracy. Which form of government said the working people should rise up and control the means of production? That would be communism. Which form of government is power held by a wealthy few? Remember, it's not always wealthy, but this is rule by a few. This is oligarchy. And that's it. I want to thank you guys for watching. Be sure to subscribe because up next we're starting to look at domestic versus foreign affairs. Just a reminder, teachers, that this PowerPoint lessons, activities, and worksheets are all available at Teachers Pay Teachers. And again, thanks for watching, guys.